So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and actually to another RP siege, and actually it's a very similar RP siege in many ways because it is on the same map as one that we saw very recently between, I think that was Cardalin and Umbar, with Umbar on the attack being victorious over Cardalin. But usually I do like to avoid using the same maps in quick succession, but I do feel the need to use this one relatively quickly because of course 0.97 is right around the corner, and as soon as 0.97 comes out I really won't be able to use any of the old RP battles from 0.96.1 anymore, so I do want to get this one in while I still can. And these are always an interesting little tussle, because obviously all of the factions on each team have got to be the same. Well, all of the players on each team have got to be the same faction. So in this case we have IMLADRIS on the defence, and the replay was sent to me by Arsal Ali, so big thank you to him. And on the attack we have the Variags and Khan varying players, of course, which we will go through in just a moment. Last time around I did feel as though Umbar always had a bit of a leg up, being the aggressors over Cardalin defenders rather. This time around, however, I think it is a little bit different. IMLADRIS are very well suited among the elves to be defenders in this way. They combine the skill of elves with a little bit more muscle, you could say, and I do feel as though IMLADRIS, when they are in a defensive siege, are very well positioned. All of the elves are really, but IMLADRIS in particular, because they just tend to have that little bit more of a heavy duty nature about them when compared to the other elven factions. And Khand, of course, they are going to need to be careful, because if they charge in unthinkingly, go sort of single file line, that sort of wave-based tactics, they're going to be in trouble, because they're going to break before they do any significant damage to IMLADRIS. Khand do have options in a siege, but a lot of their infantry is AP focused with lower skill, which could be tricky for them to wear down IMLADRIS. So normally I do go for the attackers when they're outnumbering the defenders to win, but this time around I think I'm actually going to go IMLADRIS, just because I rate IMLADRIS quite highly in this situation. I think Khand are going to really struggle to gain a foothold quickly. Also, let's not forget that Khand don't have access to catapults or ballistas to tear down the outer walls with. They only have access to the Black Powder Hwacha, which is a very different piece of siege equipment and how it is intended to be used. We'll go through the Khandish armies first of all, however, starting off with Kurogurochan, playing on the northern end of the settlement here. A couple of units of Variag bowmen out here, which, as far as bowmen goes, are very efficient. Obviously similar in many ways to the Balagire archers from Umbar. They have that little buckler, decent armour, you know, not great damage but passable, and that's their entire purpose, skirmishing with other archers and getting good value for money. We also have some nomadic axemen over here, which are sort of cheap axemen of a similar kind to something like the Orc Maulers. That's the sort of unit you would see, well, in terms of stats, that's the kind of unit you would be comparing them to. So very disposable, very cheap, not necessarily got a huge amount of staying power in melee. They will start to die off pretty quickly. Their AP will be useful against some of the IMLADRIS units, but the lower skill is really going to hurt them. And also, again, they're very weak to any sort of range fire. IMLADRIS may be the least archer-focused faction. Well, they may have the least archer focus of all the elven factions, but the elven archers will still be able to rip through them with very limited issues. Variag warriors, kind of similar, only they may be better suited to fighting off against elves, as I've said before, as heavy swordsmen. A little bit higher in terms of skill, but again, they're on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to heavy swordsmen like this. So the elves should still be able to defeat them with limited issues, but again, a numbers equation is what it's going to be for Khand here. They're going to need to overwhelm the elves rather than beat them in a straight fair contest. More nomadic axemen and Variag warriors in and amongst them. Nurad Warchief retainers, which could potentially be an incredibly useful unit to have in this situation, because they are a unit which can go toe to toe with the elves in terms of quality. Phalanx formation, very useful of course. Armor piercing as well, multiple HP, all of the good stuff. But IMLADRIS do have access to pikes, so they won't necessarily be able to act with impunity, and also it's a very clear target to try and focus down if you are IMLADRIS. As are the Brotherhood of the Axe. Again, they may be slightly more AP focused than you would like against the elves, but this is IMLADRIS, so that will still help. But also, as a higher tier shock unit like this, they may not be multiple HP, but they do still have good stats all around. So if they engage with the right targets, they should still be able to get a decent amount done. Nurad Halberds, again, very similar story here with the Nurad Warchief retainers, only in a more general sense. Obviously they're going to be on the front line a little bit more readily than the General's Bodyguard unit are. But again, the same weaknesses. They may be able to get their phalanx down as long as the IMLADRIS pikes are not present, and of course enemy archers will be able to deal a decent amount of damage to them as well. Archers, however, will not be able to do a decent amount of damage to the Nurad footmen from the front. Again, decent armour. Good shields, though, is the primary reason for that. Armour piercing, once again, not going to be completely useless, especially against IMLADRIS, but the skill may very well come back to haunt them here, because they are up against some of the best warriors in the business. and then a couple of units of nomadic marauders as well. Axe throwers, of course, which they could be very useful actually. If they can get into a position where they're not being shot, they'll be able to throw their axes into melee and do a decent amount of damage, I feel. But we'll go through the other Khandish armies now a little bit more quickly. I think we're probably going to see a lot of the same units, although the Brotherhood of the Sword, good choice against the elves. Again, ranged is going to be their weakness because they don't have a shield, of course. Their armour is not bad, but under sustained arrow fire they will still suffer because they're not multiple HP and the lack of a shield does hurt them. But once they're in melee, they do have good skill, and they are one of the units which can sort of go blow for blow with some of the better elven units. But of course they are more limited in number and how many Khan can bring. Brotherhood of the Axe, we've already seen them, of course, more of an AP focus on them. And the Shadow Blades, another unit which is very skillful in melee, and they also have those throwing daggers which can be very, very useful, but again, very limited in terms of the numbers they can be brought, so they have to be deployed wisely here by WK, who's playing as another one of the Khandish armies. And then over here we have the Variag Warriors, which Variag Warriors, of course, we've already seen them, but they have the armour upgrade, so they're a little bit more tanky. They'll be able to last in melee a little bit longer with the elves. Moving across the rest of the army, we can see some more Nereid Footmen. Lots of siege equipment strewn across the battlefield, some Nereid Footmen over here as well. Nomadic Light Infantry, which are, of course, the lowest tier of Khandish infantry. I think they are actually the cheapest unit that Khan can bring, just in general. And they are very similar to something like Angmar Marauders, or maybe even something even lower. No, I'd say Angmar Marauders are a fair comparison. Nomadic Light Infantry are very, very numerous, but also not very potent individually. They are certainly a swarming unit. You're going to try and get in and around the enemy, overwhelm them with sheer numbers, and weight of numbers is really the only thing that Nomadic Light Infantry can count on. They do wield an axe, which doesn't mean that they are AP, of course, but it does mean that they are maybe a little bit more attack focused than some other forms of militia, but even so, it's not really going to help them against the elves. Their numbers are going to be the key here, if they are going to be effective at all. More Nomadic Axemen, Nereid Footmen, and then back here we have the slightly more organised section of the army with some Nereid Halberds, again some Bowmen, Variag Bowmen actually, and once again they have the armour upgrade, so once again a little bit tankier. And back here another unit of Nomadic Light Infantry, nearby to another unit of Nereid Warchief Retainers. Then to the south of the settlement we have Mech Starling, who has brought the Black Powder Hwacha. I've never seen the Hwacha used to bring down fortifications before, so I'm not entirely sure how it will react in that sort of in this sort of environment. We shall see though. The Hwacha is a fantastic killing machine against sort of wide formations on an open field. Not so sure how it's going to do here. We shall see that. Nomadic Marauders over here, once again the Axe Throwers. You can see more Nereid Footmen in dense blocks. Over here we can see some Brotherhood of the Axe and some more Variag Warriors, similar units to what we've seen before. Nereid Warchief Retainers, and then over on this side some Brotherhood of the Sword. Looks like a smaller army. I'd imagine there's probably at least a couple of hidden units around here, but time will tell. And then over here finally we have Rules 1, again playing as Khan, of course, so we have the Nomadic Light Infantry pushing up a ram, and the rest of his army is back here. Another Hwacha. He's actually got some horsemen as well, we'll get onto them in a moment. Nereid Footmen on the front lines, Nomadic Axemen just in behind them. Again, Brotherhood of the Axe, Nereid Warchief Retainers, a couple of Nomadic Marauders, and then a couple of units of the mounted throwing Axemen. We have the Nomadic Scouts, which again, just because they have that potent throwing axe projectile, they could be useful. But again, the mobility is unlikely to be terribly handy. I mean, if the elves sally out, they could see some use as sort of a screening tool to try and get the elves to back off a little bit. If not, they could just be used as a sort of makeshift standard throwing axe unit in the later game when they can bombard the elves from afar. But now we shall move on to IMLADRIS within the fortification. So of course we have Arsal, we have Enxfit, and we have... who's the third player? Eclipse 2500 of the Dark Cloud, so there we go. So we have a combination Eldar Makar with the armour upgrades and Eldar Quinga without the armour upgrades, so the more basic IMLADRIS units, but even so, that's going to be just fine against most of the Khandish infantry. Most of the Khandish infantry actually will probably prefer to fight some of the more heavily armoured Elven units in all probability, because they'll be a little bit more efficient against them. Whereas the Eldar Makar, of course, very lightly armoured. Even with the armour upgrade, their armour values are still nowhere near as high as some of the higher tier units. Eldraenway Harry McKeel, which outside of units which get into General's Bodyguard tier, where you see multiple HP, the Harry McKeel are one of the most devastating units of infantry in the game. Of course, again, a heavy swordsman, very potent Elven heavy swordsman. Eldar Quinga, more Eldar Makar back there, and some Eldar Atar as well in the background you saw. Not really the biggest fan of them, but I am a big fan of the IMLADRIS Sentries. They're a terrific pike unit. Makes it very, very tricky to take down IMLADRIS from the front, but that does often mean that IMLADRIS's front line is a little bit narrower than it would otherwise be, because they are very expensive. But that's obviously not a problem in a siege, because generally speaking the engagements are narrow anyway. Eldorenway Heru Hatal over here as well, and IMLADRIS Guardians, which have the armour upgrades. Over here we also have some Gwythi Rockdorf Megspits getting ready to sally out, and Khan have very limited ranged options here. So the Gwythi Rockdorf could prove to be a very interesting foe to try and deal with. The Mounted Throwing Axeman could prove to be very important indeed. Eldark Winger over here, more pikes, more Eldorenway mixed in with them as well. Gwythi Arthand up on the walls. I'm a little bit surprised they're up there, to be honest with you, the multiple HP spears. More heavy swordsmen in the IMLADRIS Blade Masters, not quite as good as the Haru Makil of course, but still very strong. Eldar Makar over here, and you can see of course again, once again we have the Gwythi Arthand with the combination of the pikes and heavy swordsmen. Gwythi Arthand of course, extremely difficult to kill, very resilient. They seem to last longer than I expect them to in every fight. You'd think I'd gotten used to them by now, but apparently not. Some Gwythi Myrdain over here, so again the AP hammers. They will be changing in 0.97 to just a straight two-handed warhammer, so they're going to be ditching their shields for a bit more offensive potency, which will bring them... It will probably make them honestly the best two-handed sort of shock unit in the game. Well, the best armour-piercing bodyguard unit in the game, sort of that shock troop alongside the likes of the Witch Realm Hammer Guard and the Tharbad Warhammers, because I can't imagine that anything else will be able to go toe-to-toe with an IMLADRIS offering in that class. Noratin Warriors over here, some IMLADRIS Guardians without the armour upgrade. Getting back towards the town centre is a very similar setup that we see here again, only this time we've got some catapults in the town centre. I hope that these catapults are used a little bit more wisely than the trebuchets we saw last time, because the trebuchets, while they did get some decent hits later on, they wasted so much of their ammo just impotently flinging their projectiles miles into the enemy formations, and it didn't really work out for them. Heru Hatal and Gwythi Arthand once again, more Gwythi Myrdain, more pikes, more guardians, so you know what to expect from IMLADRIS. Some very potent units indeed, and then there's also some Eldar Makar down there in that corner. So, without further ado, let's begin. And I'd actually expect there to be this battle to get underway relatively quickly, because I just can't imagine that Khan are going to be able to bombard the fortress in quite the same way that we saw Umbar last time. Simply because I don't really think that the Hwacha is going to be able to do that. And we'll see. I've never seen the Hwacha take on a wall. I mean, it's possible that, I suppose that they should be able to bring down walls, but also that they're going to use up a huge portion of their ammunition doing that. Also, the Hwacha now at this point is actually being used to try and screen off the Gwythi Rockdor, so Engspitz is having to sort of stray to the side, able to dodge most of those rockets as they come in. But how they use these Gwythi Rockdor could prove to be pretty crucial here, because if Khan don't have a decent way to deal with them, I mean, the Nomadic Marauders, the Axe Throwers in general, probably the best way for Starling to do that, because he's got very little in the way of anti-cavalry in his army, so he's going to have to rely on those throwing axemen. A bit of a weak source charge there. They were too close when they gave the attack order, and that just led to them sort of awkwardly bumping into the Variag warriors, and that of course means that they're going to take a few casualties, you'd imagine, actually, from the well, no, they all managed to escape with their lives just about, but the throwing axemen are there. Well, I say that, there's one trying to escape, and he does manage to do so. But yeah, the throwing axemen are going to be the key here. Both mounted and dismounted. If the Gwythi Rockdor stick around for too long, they're going to find themselves in real trouble. However, you can see that already on this side of things, it looks as though WK being very aggressive with his siege towers and with his ladders, blanketing the walls with some of his infantry, which is the key here, because if he goes in sort of to engage with those too narrow, there's no way that Khan are going to make any sort of progress with nomadic light infantry, and even with Nurad footmen, really. So WK certainly doing exactly the right thing, but he is in immediate danger now of the Gwythi Rockdor charging into the side of some of his infantry. And in go the Gwythi Rockdor. That should be a better charge. They managed to get their lances down, and you can see that, yes indeed, the Nurad footman, the man count of them is tumbling already, but the Gwythi Rockdor need to get out of there. They're in danger here of being bogged down in a bunch of AP units, and they're trying to pull through here, the Gwythi Rockdor, but that's a mistake, because they're going to take losses from doing that. I'm amazed that more of them haven't died. It just goes to show how durable they really are. I suppose he didn't want to go back out because the nomadic scouts are right there, but if he was a little bit more quick on the draw there, he could have pulled out and then gone around here to charge the Variag bowmen. Instead, he pulled through. As a result, he's having to charge into a lot of AP troops. He's getting a lot of kills, to be fair, but the Gwythi Rockdor are capable of being real world beaters, and they're really in and amongst it now. I mean, to be fair, he is at least stalling WK's advance fairly well. Meanwhile, Kuro is also doing the same over on this side. A little bit more of a narrower approach that he's going for, but there is this sort of little section at the back of the fortress as well, and also on this fortress, generally speaking, the attacker that's on this side, because they start right next to the town centre, tend to have the hardest time, because of course the defenders have to defend the town centre with everything they have, so some of the most elite troops Kuro will probably have to face right from the off, which, considering it's IMLADRIS, not great for them. Meanwhile, what have we got over here? Some nomadic scouts. More nomadic scouts. Oh, those are the same ones. So yeah, Rule's still chasing them down, and he's harassing them with those throwing axes. Needs to be a little bit careful that he doesn't get too caught up in melee with them, because the Gwaith'i Roktor will easily be able to defeat these cavalrymen in melee. But I think the Gwaith'i Roktor have been bamboozled here. They've been pulled out, and now the nomadic scouts are going to be able to sort of shadow them wherever they go and continue to throw those axes into them, and that's a very good use of the nomadic scouts here. So the Elven cavalry proving to be somewhat impotent in this battle. They managed to get a decent charge off, but one decent charge, a couple of decent charges off. I mean, that wasn't even a decent charge when you look at it. Not many corpses on the floor there. Really, it was over here. This rather small looking pile, honestly, of Nurad footmen is all that the Gwaith'i Roktor have to show for their efforts, so good use there of the AP foot troops that Khan have, and of course of the cavalry in particular, to zone out the Gwaith'i Roktor. And already one of the most deadly tools that IMLADRIS had at their disposal has already been made to look fairly impotent. Nomadic light infantry pushing their ram up. They'll be able to push their way through the gates, of course. Be interested to see how quickly Khan decide to push in here. IMLADRIS still just shifting around. I would certainly hope that IMLADRIS do, again, one of the mistakes that Cardland made in the last fight was they didn't really commit to the outer walls or to just sort of defending the town centre. They didn't do one or the other. They ended up going for a sort of in-between approach, which didn't work at all. Umbar were able to systematically destroy every defence they came across. I would certainly hope that doesn't prove to be the case with IMLADRIS this time around. They will be able to stand up to that sort of tactic a little bit better than Cardland were. But ultimately I would still think that the numbers of Khan would then allow them to sort of swamp over the settlement. IMLADRIS definitely need to have a more concrete plan in place, choose their ground and then defend it, rather than trying to defend everything with an even number of troops. The Warhorn blares, and Rules is not going to be attacking this angle of the town. Instead, he is going to be linking up with Starling's army in its entirety. And to be fair, this settlement has such a wide surface area that you can attack that you don't necessarily need to attack every section of wall. Going all in on just 3 sides is still a large area that the elves need to cover, especially the elves with their more limited manpower. My Rules is now battering down the gate. Medieval siege equipment, obviously. Medieval 2 siege equipment tends to take a little bit of time to get into place. Well, you can see over here that once again WK really setting up more siege towers. There's a lot of angles that Khan are going to be able to go up, and you can see that they are now starting to go up onto the walls, which is good to see. After all, eventually you do need to sort of gather your courage and meet the enemy in melee, and I think that's what's going to be happening over here as well. Bit of melee going on as the Nurad footmen scale the walls. Nurad footmen, of course, are far from a poor unit in melee. Very robust, a very useful infantry unit for Khan to have, but they are outclassed here. Upgraded IMLADRIS Guardians are arguably the finest unit of line infantry in the game. But the Nurad footmen, they are clearing a space, getting some support from the nomadic light infantry. Again, numbers are what, if the announcer would shut up for a second and let me get a word in edgeways. Numbers are going to be the name of the game here for Khan. They're going to need to keep applying pressure to IMLADRIS throughout the battle and hope that eventually they can break them. Meanwhile, IMLADRIS actually counter-attacking a little bit into Khan there, calling their bluff and putting a bit of pressure on them. Meanwhile, over here, I'm not sure whether this IMLADRIS Guardian unit is going to be having the best time, because they are going to be sandwiched in between a lot of Khandish units, and the upgraded Variag warriors, they have a decent amount of skill to them. They will still lose, of course, 1-to-1 to IMLADRIS Guardians fairly handily, but again, it's about that attrition-based warfare, and we saw this sort of engagement time and time again between Cardallan and Umbar in the last fight, where individual units like this would just get isolated from support, And time again that was happening. And if that's allowed to happen again, Khand will win. IMLADRIS will be able to put up more of a fight, as I said, than Cardinal will, just because IMLADRIS are able to deal with this kind of warfare more readily, but it will still end the same way, I feel. Meanwhile, those Brotherhood of the Axe, I was going to say, that was not really the engagement they wanted. And they are right near all of these towers. A lot of towers, in fact, over here, that Kuro's going to have to put up with, but more of his men are getting up the ladders now. Nomadic Axeman. Kuro definitely has the hardest angle to attack, but attack it he must. Just to engage with IMLADRIS and make sure that they aren't allowed to focus down his allies, because I do feel as though his allies are going to be where this battle will be won or lost for Khand. Meanwhile, Nomadic Marauders getting point blank and doing a lot of damage to the Elder Enway Harry Vital. Fire arrows coming in, and great use of the Throwing Axeman here. Throwing Axeman, of course, can be very useful, but meanwhile, that in the background there is absolutely not what they want to be happening, as the camera shakes hideously whenever the Hwacha is used. But the Hwacha there, I'm not really sure what Starling was thinking, because they were never really going to hit anything other than their own men, and taking too many Hwacha shots from a low tier to a low tier Khandish unit is going to cause them to break very quickly, especially when they're in melee with the elves. If they want to do that, they want to get the Hwacha a little bit closer, but that of course invites the elves to counter-attack yet further. Meanwhile, you can see up here on the wall some more Nomadic Axemen from WK, obviously finding those gaps, the elves finding it really difficult to cover every section of wall. But the Nomadic Axemen will still fall by the wayside, because again they're fighting a unit which is of far higher quality than themselves. And that is going to be the key for IMLADRIS. They need to hope that their quality units can do the business for them. Meanwhile, the Nurad Footmen and the Nomadic Light Infantry together, Nurad Footmen maybe a little bit more robust than I was giving them credit for, because they have cleared a space on the wall. It says defeat still seems certain, and they are shaken. And that does make a good deal of sense, but if they do get some reinforcements up on the wall, or excuse me, allergies, then maybe they can make that stick. Meanwhile, down here, the High Elven Catapult getting a decent hit there into the centre of the Nurad Halberds, causing them to waver already in places. And that is going to be another thing that Khand have to contend with, that the elves most certainly won't. Spotty morale. And the IMLADRIS sentries alongside the Guardians holding down the front line. It's a lot of Nurad that they're having to hold back though, but the Gwaith'i Arthand are also right there on the front line. Meanwhile up here, more of the Variags cresting the wall, but yet the elves are still here to meet them. The Eldar Makar, and of course the IMLADRIS Blade Masters, fantastic heavy elven swordsmen which were able to cleave their way through Nomadic Light Infantry all day long, and even the Nurad Footmen will really struggle against them. Meanwhile, Khand actually finding themselves surrounded over here, the Variag Warriors completely surrounded by Eldar Makar, just the standard variant without the armour upgrade. But yeah, these Variag Warriors are going to break pretty quickly, you'd imagine. They are wavering already, completely cut off and surrounded. You can see over here as well the Variag Warriors continuing to fight, and this unit of IMLADRIS Guardians no longer isolated. Some Variag Bowmen up on the walls, however, in a good position as well. But they are taking hits from the towers, of course. I think, yeah, more of WK's army, so he's been very aggressive here, sending over some units towards Kuro's section, but the Variag Warriors being stopped dead in their tracks by the Elder Enway Harry Vital. Meanwhile, how is Kuro getting on? Not great, and that's not too surprising, because of course there were Elder Enway in abundance in the town centre, and they were immediately ready to meet Kuro's advance. And Nomadic Axemen, of course, are no challenge for a unit of highly trained Elder Enway swordsmen and spears. It's also Gwaith'i Myrdain ready to climb up onto the walls in support of IMLADRIS Guardians, so certainly a very, very difficult task on hand for Kuro here to make any sort of dent in the Elven line. Nomadic Axemen certainly won't be up to the task. There's also those towers firing away. Meanwhile, there are two armies down here, the combined forces of Starling and Rules. They did actually push their way a fair distance in, but I mean the Elven jaws are going to close now. The Eldar Atar are going to block the way. I mean, the Nurad Footmen, I think, are they just going to try and punch right on through the catapult? I mean, they can't be. There's so much in the way. I don't really know if that... Yeah, they're breaking already. That's not too surprising. That was always going to be a very, very difficult task for the Nurad Footmen to go all in, all on their lonesome. And I don't know, I mean, you can still hear all of those arrow towers continuing to poke and prod away at the Khandish manpower. More ladders being set up, more Nomadic Axemen climbing up onto the walls. Speaking of Nomadic Axemen, there's a huge pile of their corpses over here as the IMLADRIS Blade Masters shredded through them, came to the aid of the IMLADRIS Guardians, and now they have turned around and this section of the wall little bit spread out. Nomadic light infantry, however, of course, like I said at the start, they're going to be absolutely no match for the IMLADRIS Guardians. But a speed bump on the IMLADRIS Guardians' journey. Nurad footmen can put up a little bit more of a fight, as we've already seen, actually. Primarily just from staying alive longer. But they're here. The IMLADRIS Guardians are having to fight here. I mean, this unit of IMLADRIS Guardians is looking pretty thin on the ground at this point. Meanwhile, down here on the gatehouse, those catapult hits definitely prove to be very, very decisive as IMLADRIS are starting to push Khan back outside the walls. Which is not a good sign for Khan, because if they can't sustain this assault, they're going to be in a little bit of trouble. Meanwhile, these Variag warriors are still fighting well against the IMLADRIS Guardians, a bit of a protracted engagement over here. Some nomadic scouts in the background. I mean, WK really doesn't have much of his army held in reserve at all. He does still have his Brotherhood units, which is good, because I think they are going to be sorely needed. These Variag bowmen have been allowed to get into a good position to fire, but I don't really know how much damage they've been able to do thus far. I think they're trying to shoot into that blob down there, which is the right move, but again, I don't know how much damage they'll actually be able to do. These Variag warriors still going, well, trying to fight the Elder Enway, but you can just see how the engagement has gone. Tons of Variag corpses. Basically no Elder Enway corpses. The quality gap is pretty high between those two units after all. Meanwhile, Gwaithir Myrdain have been committed to the walls. You can see that there are more Variag warriors without the armour upgrade over here. If they don't stand a chance with their upgraded armour, they certainly don't stand a chance without it. And Kuro certainly having a real issue trying to clear a space on the wall, but again, it's to be expected. A lot of the Elven elites were back here near the town centre. But the assault does persist. The Nurad footmen now cresting the wall, getting up into the faces of the IMLADRIS Guardians, but you would still expect the Elven unit to hold fast. Very otherwise, you can actually see the Nurad Warchief retainers are up on the walls now as well. But so too are the IMLADRIS sentries, so if it was Kuro's hope to use that phalanx formation to his advantage to clear a space on the wall, with the Elven pikemen there, he's not going to be able to do that with impunity. But still, the Warchief retainers should at least be enough to give the IMLADRIS Guardians a bit of pause, as we continue to sort of cycle around the settlement in a circular fashion, anti-clockwise. Yeah, that initial assault from Khan was beaten off without too many issues. Meanwhile, over here, you can see Starling and Rules coming forward in huge numbers here, trying to just force the Elven defences out of the way. That's a little bit better use of the Watcher. As you can see, as soon as the Elder Enway Hero Hatal moved to engage the back of the Nurad footmen, they did use the Watcher, able to kill off a decent number there of the heavy Elven spears. Now the Nurad footmen can turn around with a significant numbers advantage, so Khan able to gain a grip over this corner of the settlement now. Again, numbers like this, flooding forwards with overwhelming force, was always going to be the way that Khan were going to try and approach this battle. And this is where they've had the most success so far. But even here, the elves are still putting up a fight, and the longer they stand here, the more damage those towers are going to do, and also the more damage WK's army is going to take, and WK is in need of reinforcements at this point. He spread himself maybe a little bit too thin, as the elves were able to engage him wherever he was. Those Nurad footmen are shaken, but the IMLADRIS forces are just retreating from that front line. And now actually you can see that with the collapse of WK's wing over here, some reinforcements are going to be able to be sent over to this corner of the settlement, and that's going to slow down the advance of Starling and Rules. Yeah, those Eldar Makar also victorious. One of the enemy generals is down, and I would assume that's Kuro's, because that was Warchief retainers I caught the glimpse of. Meanwhile, you can see over here Brotherhood of the Sword, Brotherhood Shadowblades, there's arrow fire coming in here, but you can see just the amount of purple on the floor there. Huge amount of dead Nurads, very limited amount of dead elves. Which does go to show, I mean, it is a difficult situation for Khan to try and overcome this. And over here the Variag warriors, looks like they have finally been dealt with as well. We're around the halfway point of the battle, and the elves are ahead, as you would expect, but as the battle goes along, will their manpower be able to hold? That is the ultimate question here. Well, that assault has definitely been beaten back, and so too has this one. The addition of the Gwaithir Myrdain up here as well, giving the Nurad footmen absolutely no chance. There was a halberdier in there as well. What is Kuro going to do now? Because, I mean, just committing forward more and more men over here clearly is not having the desired effect. The Warchief retainers also just being completely overrun. One of the most potent units in Khan's entire roster, and it has just been held in place and it's being exterminated systematically by the elves. Kuro sort of sending his units around here, maybe trying to link up a little bit with Rules and Starling's armies in the south, possibly. This is where Khan have had the most luck so far, but even down here it's not been a clean sweep. That initial advance with those two Nurad footmen trying to push their way down the street went hideously. I think maybe they did kill the Eldar Itar in the end, but that's a poor prize to claim. In my opinion, by far and away the weakest of the IMLADRIS units. Meanwhile, the Nomadic Axemen again just coming forward in sheer numbers here, trying to crush the Elder Enway Harumasil beneath them. There's also some Nurad footmen coming up here, so it's a small victory, but at this point I'm sure Khan will take what they can get. Down here, Elder Enway Harumasil killing off the few Axemen that are left behind as stragglers. There's a bit of an engagement happening over here as well, although again it's a lot more Nurad footmen you can see here against a rather thin line of Eldar Makar, so it's only a matter of time before once again Khan can break through here as well. Although I say that, Eclipse 2500 is on the way with a substantial amount of reinforcements, including a catapult. The catapult seeing this as a blob which is too tempting to resist, and the Nurad footmen are actually already shaken. Even though they're winning this fight, they are shaken, they're wavering now as well. One hit from the catapult is all it's going to take to send this this Khandish infantry force routing. Can they do it though? Well, I mean, there it goes. It's a grazing hit only, but it should, yeah, applies the morale debuff and they're gone. The elves able to hold their nerve far better there than the Khandish units, and that is of course a case of you get what you pay for. The elves are much more expensive. Khan, obviously, you can field a lot more units for a lot less money, but that is a side effect of that. Yep. Oh, hello. Once again, the catapult trying to shoot into the, I think onto the walls over there where Khan are having a bit of success. I think Kuro is completely... Well, actually, you can see here just the staying power of the Nurad Warchief retainers, because Kuro has essentially abandoned this front. They're just being left here because they can't be retreated, but they're still fighting. And they are actually getting kills on the Elder Enway Harumasil, so it does go to show how strong they really are. But ultimately, in combination with those towers which are still shooting them, you can see the blood sprays coming up. And now the Gwaith'i Myrdain are going to surround them. That is going to be the end. They're also shaken, so that's certainly not going to help matters. Kuro coming in to help out his allies in the south though, but this is obviously narrowing the engagement for the elves, which in the long run you would imagine should help them. Meanwhile, there is the Hwacha there, which the elves I think were trying to counter-attack into, but the Eldar Quinga being told where to go here as a huge slew of Khandish infantry come to the aid of their artillery. There's some horsemen as well. Maybe seeing the opportunity to go for a bit of a gap, but again they're not really lancers, so it's not really going to be the sort of thing which IMLADRIS are going to be overly concerned with as the nomadic scouts charge into the settlement. But what are they going to be able to accomplish here? I mean, all it takes as well is a single unit of archers to see them, and you can only see from what they're wearing that they're going to get shredded by any sort of arrow fire. They're already shaken. You can see that their unit count is already plummeting. Arrows from the towers and from the banks of archers further into the settlement already shooting them. They did a good job earlier on of dealing with that unit of Gwaith'i Rockdor. Once again, the Elven Catapult getting a shot right into the centre of the Khandish formations there as they try and force their way through the gate quickly. They are able to swamp over the IMLADRIS sentries, and getting into close quarters with those war clubs should bear fruit for those Nurad footmen, but men are going flying here as they try and push past one another. That was a lot of friendly fire actually that Elven Catapult just got. I mean, yeah, that was a lot of friendly fire, but unfortunate there. That is going to give Khan a real advantage here in the south, but still, there is Elven resistance over here. And while in the end I think that Khan are going to have gained the upper hand in this engagement here in the south, elsewhere they're going to have it far less their own way. Yeah, WK's army is looking very, very thin on the ground indeed. To the point where I think only a single unit of Haru Vital is really committed over here to defending this position, but there are also those nomadic marauders, the throwing axemen, firing point blank into these Elder Enway heavy spears. Which is not good for them actually, because that may leave a bit of a gap for what's left of WK's army, and The Elven defenders have migrated elsewhere in the settlement, which does leave a bit of a window for what's left of the WK's army to make something happen. Really nothing left over here, though. I mean, you can still the Nurad War Chief retainers are fighting, and victory seems certain. I think that's being a little bit too optimistic for them. If it were just the Heru Makil, yeah, they would have won. But now with the Gwaithir Myrdain, I don't think that's going to be the case. They're also now wavering. The best sign for them. But really, the vast majority of the action is going to be happening now in the south of the settlement. Eldar Atar are retreating. The catapults now all pointing down here because they know that this is where the vast majority of the Khandish attack is going to be coming from. Nurad Halberd, War Chief retainers, a lot of Nurad footmen, there's some Brotherhood of the Sword in there. There goes another general though. Unfortunate loss for Khan. We've already seen how flimsy their morale can be, and that's certainly not going to help matters. But it is only, again, a single unit of Eldar Enway Haru Hatar which are holding the line here. And against all of those halberds, once they get into phalanx formation, that's not going to be great for them. Up here, the Brotherhood of the Axe taking up position. Nomadic Axemen also. Still those towers firing away. Noratirno warriors coming down here now. The elves, I think, trying to sort of reposition, and I mean, this is the risk that the elves are running here, because the elves are running out of manpower slowly but surely, whereas the Khandish hordes seem to just keep coming, breaking over the walls. Noratirno warriors trying to fight in melee. They are actually decent in melee, that's the main reason for bringing them over the Eldar Quinga. In fact, they do have better melee stats. Gwaithir Arthand, of course, the tanks that they are, fighting right in and amongst the action against the Nurad. Doing a good job there as well. Heru Makil victorious up on this wall, actually. Some Brotherhood of the Axe down here as well. Nomadic Marauders getting on the walls. What's happening here? Starling Shadow Blades. What have we here? And you can see in the settlement now that there are little engagements like this cropping up. Brotherhood of the Sword against IMLADRIS Blade Masters. And the Brotherhood of the Sword should win this, unless the towers affect the fight a huge amount. Huge numbers advantage. Brotherhood of the Sword are very capable of going up against Elven units like this as well, so who knows? Reasons to be cheerful here for Khan. Going to get some support from the Nomadic Light Infantry as well, although they're already wavering. They're trying to push through this front line over here, which is why reinforcements did arrive, and that is going to stop this advance dead. The Nurad War Chief retainers of WK. Not going to do so well against the IMLADRIS sentries. What on earth is going on here? Well, I mean, this is an audacious attempt from WK to take the town centre. The Brotherhood of the Sword are here. I mean, they're going to need to answer this challenge based on the amount of time that's left. Of course, they will. But even so, you can see that WK has shifted his troops over to where Kuro was, so they've almost been rotating around the settlement to where IMLADRIS have sort of undermanned their defence a little bit, and hoping to find those little gaps. And, you know, again, with those little engagements like the Brotherhood of the Sword facing the Blade Masters in the streets, there is signs that it is working. Brotherhood of the Axe are also going to climb down off the walls, and their presence is going to be needed because the Gwaithir Myrdain are on the way in, which should stop the timer. Bit of a weird, yeah, there we go. Bit of a weird shimmy there from the Gwaithir Myrdain. It's not really up to Arsal at this point. He needs to charge in there. He cannot afford to preserve the lives of his Gwaithir Myrdain anymore. As much as you may want to preserve the lives of your elites, sometimes, you know, most of the time I would argue, you just need to throw them in there and let them do their thing. Gwaithir Arthand also, so yeah, Elven elites at this point coming to shore up the town centre. That will probably be enough to keep WK at bay, to be honest with you, but these are units which they will no longer have to deal with elsewhere on the battlefield. Meanwhile, my Elven catapult's actually being destroyed at this point. Is that as a result of the Hwatcher? It must be, because it is firing. And I can only see Khandish units over here at this point, so they have managed to break off the Elven defence by the looks of things. Brotherhood of the Axe heading up onto the walls, dealing damage to those Elven defenders. While over here as well, Khan looking like they're going to be victorious in this section as well. Not enough defenders over here. A single unit of Eldar Enway Spearmen was never going to be able to hold up against that sort of onslaught. The Eldar Quinga trying to lay down some support from a distance, I think, but I don't know. I mean, the elves are running out of manpower if you look on, particularly on the mini-map. I mean, it paints a pretty grim picture. You can see the Reds are now very much within the settlement. There goes a general as well. Brotherhood of the Axe showing their teeth. But back here the elves do still have reserves, and they do still have reserves of decent quality as well. What's happening back here? And you can see those Gwaithir Myrdain taking a few losses, but ultimately, of course, the upper echelons of the IMLADRIS roster are always going to be able to defeat the Brotherhood units from Khan. As good as the Brotherhood units may be, this is a whole nother level. Shadowblade's defeat seems certain. Yeah, and they're facing off against IMLADRIS Guardians. The Shadowblades are certainly not a unit which can sort of mix it in a very grindy fight for all that long. You know, they are an assassin unit after all. And the IMLADRIS Guardians just able to overwhelm them. Heading over to here, what is happening with the remnants of WK's army? Looks like he is making a little bit of progress. I mean, the axe throwers are in here, Rules offering a little bit of support. Gwaithir Myrdain and Pikes now being forced to retreat. So, yeah, I mean, with the support that Khan have given over here, Khan have managed to push their way through these defences. There's another unit of War Chief Retainers over here as well, obviously a very strong unit. Another unit of Shadowblades. Black Powder Hwacha pushing ever further into the settlement, so they have managed to push into the settlement and they will be able to lay siege to the town centre now, but do Khan have enough left in the tank? Well, those Brotherhood of the Sword, they were victorious against the IMLADRIS Blade Masters. They took casualties to show for it, but now engaging with some Noratuno warriors here in the centre of town. And the announcer is still not feeling too confident about IMLADRIS' chances here. Still outnumbered. Not outgunned though, not yet. Gwaithir Arthan coming down here to try and finish off, well I say finish off, that's a fairly healthy unit of Murad War Chief Retainers. They're stretched, but again we're starting to see these little engagements cropping up. Eldar Quinga isolated, and now they're going to be destroyed by the Khandish force as it advances through the town. Eldar Quinga are a unit which the defenders probably won't mind losing as much, but still every man's going to count as this fight continues. High Elven Catapult getting into position, they will still have ammunition of course. You can see over here, Gwaithir Myrdain, the Brotherhood units gave as good as they could, and there are several dead elves in there, but they were ultimately defeated of course. There's a single axeman up here who's routing, taking shots directly to the face, and that's going to be just about it for this attack back here. So yeah, the defenders at this point can focus on holding this angle of the settlement. What have we got going on over here? This is not a great engagement for the elves either. The Nurag War Chief Retainers' victory seems certain. Their phalanx is down, armour piercing, very skillful as well, which is exactly the sort of thing the Eldaranwe Haru Hatal will not want to face. Doing a good job here on the front line, Khan. In addition to that, there's a very depleted unit of axe throwers, but that's certainly going to make going a little bit easier for Khan as they try and break apart these little formations. And again, you know, just like in the last battle, little pockets of resistance like this, isolated and left to die basically by the defenders. There are reinforcements heading down here now. One of the Khandish armies has been destroyed. I'd imagine that's probably WK. Kuro, yeah, it has to be because Kuro still has units over here. WK though, sacrificing his life for the furthering of the Khandish cause. Yeah, and this unit over here has been left on its own now and isolated, and they're going to be destroyed. More Brotherhood units going up against, once again, the same unit of Gwaithir Myrdain, although this time they're depleted. We'll see if they're able to repeat the same trick once again. The sort of hybridization here of the Mongol and Japanese style that the Khandish forces have going on. Would you want to face a Mongolian samurai wielding a two-handed axe? I think not. Meanwhile, some Murad footmen also doing their bit to try and destroy the Eldaranwe Haru Hatal once and for all. And Khan are gaining a bit of momentum in this fight at this point. What do they have in reserve? I mean, again, the elves, they have committed forward elites in the battle up to this point as well. What's going on down here? Eldar Atar with the armour upgrades coming forwards, as well as the Gwaithir Arthan. These nomadic axemen up on the walls are facing off against the Eldar Quinga, but they're already wavering, so that could be the end of these axemen, even if they are going to get a few more kills for their trouble. Meanwhile, a bit of stuttering going on there, but there are no rangers on display. catapult shots going off. You can see there that there are some nomadic marauders routing. The War Chief Retainer's defeat seems certain at this point. Their formation, I think, being overloaded by the Gwaithir Arthan, but with the support of the nomadic marauders, it's a bit of a messy engagement this. Neither side really getting what they want. Well, the catapult, could that prove to be a game changer? Looks like they did get some hits, but ultimately those Eldarenwe were destroyed. Yeah, those Gwaithir Myrdain just don't have the manpower anymore. They were committed forward to a fight that, again, they were outnumbered, and again, it's the same situation once again. Putting up a defence where you'd be better off just retreating, consolidating your forces, sending forward a single unit into the meat grinder is not going to accomplish anything. And those Brotherhood units are still relatively healthy, and they're moving forward now, heading towards the town centre. The Hwacha is opening up, in danger of actually hitting its own men, if I'm honest, but still a few more kills for the Hwacha. Soft, oh dear, yeah. Hwacha had, it is, yeah, getting hits right in the back of their own men. That's terrible. They need to stop. And the Hwacha is a very dangerous piece of siege equipment to use for that reason. Very unpredictable, and if your own men are there, very much the Edward Longshank's philosophy of fighting. We'll hit some of theirs as well. But unfortunately can't need all the manpower they can muster here, because this is proving to be a very closely fought fight indeed. Nurad War Chief Retainer's defeat seems certain. They're being overwhelmed at this point by the Gwaithir Arthan, as well as a sort of elven expeditionary force coming out here. Gwaithir Arthan have pushed pretty far into the enemy formations, but they're up against the Brotherhood of the Axe, which is not a great engagement for the elven spears. That armour piercing, the high attack nature of the Brotherhood of the Axe, is not going to help the Gwaithir Arthan's case, and they're continuing to try and push through. They're trying to go after the throwing axemen. Ariag Bowmen, they're going to be engaged in melee as well. Nomadic Marauders are back here. There's some elven resistance as well, which is starting to come from sort of all sections of the town. A few more elven units. IMLADRIS Guardians chasing off the Brotherhood Shadowblades, and I think the Khandish assault is starting to run out of steam. You can just see that they're being forced into retreats in certain areas of the field. The elves are starting to rally a little bit, and it's looking good for IMLADRIS all of a sudden. Khan looked like, despite having a very rough opening to the game, Khan looked like they were pulling it back for a while, but it is now looking like the elves are just going to have too much left in the tank for Khan to see this assault over the line, and IMLADRIS will be able to hold on to their castle. Gwaithir Myrdain, with the support of the upgraded Eldar Makar, still the Nurad War Chief Retainers fighting hard, but with the elven pikes in close proximity, it's going to be difficult for them as well. Gwaithir Arthan marching into place as well. Those throwing axemen trying to do their best. The Brotherhood of the Axe at this point are shaken. When your elite units are starting to become shaken, it's a bad sign. It's a sign that maybe the battle isn't going your way. It is a very close battle. I mean, if we have a look, yeah, it's going to be well within the 10%, because Khan is certainly going to kill more than they already have done. Let's see here. Brotherhood Shadowblades. There goes an enemy general. Another one of the Khandish generals, which of course is going to shock their morale yet further. More axes being thrown in. The Shadowblades marching back into place after being run all over the settlement by the IMLADRIS Guardians. Run ragged. More forces coming across from over here. Does Khan have anything left here? I mean, technically they do. Couple of War Chief Retainers are still alive, but the Eldar Etar at this point outnumber them so much that that's not going to be too much of an issue. Brotherhood of the Axe looked like they were breaking for a second then, but they're not. They're just trying to shift over to engage the on-rushing Eldar Makar and catapult crew. One of them getting shanked near to the screen there. Yeah, and this is going to be the end. There's no way that Khan can come back from this. Surrounded, and ultimately they are going to be destroyed. Very good fight though. And you can see that IMLADRIS technically made some of the same mistakes Cardin did. They didn't waste their artillery ammo in quite the same way. But still, they did leave some of their units to get isolated, but Khan ultimately, they weren't able to open up the walls in quite the same way, because that's not what their siege equipment does. And Khan can be good in a siege as long as I feel as though their infantry can be used to good effect. And against the elves it's very difficult, because a lot of their armour piercing troops just don't have the morale or the skill to really mix it with the elves over a long period. They can win, of course, but it is, like I said at the start when I backed IMLADRIS to win, I just felt that IMLADRIS had the edge in this particular fight. Kharn certainly can go into a siege. It's not like Warband where the Khergit Khanate are pretty shite in sieges because they just don't have infantry. But Kharn can, but against the elves are much more at home with this style of warfare. Those 3 Warchief Retainers trying to sneakily take the town centre, but of course they're just going to be slaughtered very, very, very easily. The Brotherhood of the Axe, the last Khandish unit left standing. Probably my favourite Khandish unit as well. I'm a sucker for shock infantry that uses a big old battle axe. And the Brotherhood of the Axe as well are a very strong unit indeed. Similar in many ways to the Westmark Marshals from Rohan, functionally. But there they go, routing for the hills. And IMLADRIS, very close indeed. A 7% differential for a battle of this size is very, very good. You can see though the elves getting a lot of kills because Kharn, of course, usually bring armies with a high man count. Starling was the only one that brought a lower man count. Everyone else though bringing at least 2,500 men. 2 of the Khandish armies in fact going for over 3,500, so that goes to show why the elves were able to get so many kills. 4,500 from Eclipse. Good performance by the elves. Again, there were a few instances where I saw some of their units getting isolated and I thought, was it going to be the same story as last time where Umbar were able to systematically destroy Cardlan's defences? Not so this time around. This time, IMLADRIS, to be fair, are a little bit better at that, a little bit better at holding on as individual units. And obviously just in general are going to be more difficult to break down in this sort of situation because their infantry is stronger, whereas Cardlan much more reliant on stuff like their rangers and their crossbows to be really effective in a siege like this. So let's have a look and see what did the damage for the IMLADRIS army. So Engsvit, his MVP was, I think, 289 here from Eldar Quinga. So just a basic unit of archers getting a good amount of kills over the course of a long battle. As for Arsal, his MVP, 266 on Eldaron Way Haru Makeel. So again, we know how powerful the Haru Makeel are in a prolonged engagement where they are at their most efficient. Their stats are so high. The lack of hit points and their vulnerability against cavalry is really the thing, but of course in this sort of situation, cavalry is very unlikely to be able to get a very effective charge on them. And then of course Eclipse 2500 of the Dark Cloud getting the most kills, huge amounts of kills across all of his men. I would imagine that a lot of them comes down to the more numerous armies of Kuro and WK. 622 kills on a unit of IMLADRIS Guardians, over 400 kills on both of his units of Haru Hatal, his IMLADRIS Sentries, and also another unit of IMLADRIS Guardians, so hugely impressive. Only one unit failed to break 200 kills. Actually no, there's Eldar Makar down here with 137 and 73 on those IMLADRIS Sentries as well, but hugely impressive from his army of course, but again he was probably in front of most of the fodder, so that would explain that. So big thank you to Arsal for sending this one to me. Obviously I would imagine the RPs are going to sort of refresh and restart when 0.97 comes out, which hopefully I can actually be a little bit more involved with that sort of thing moving forward. 0.97 of course, really looking forward to that. Factions like Dorwinion, Numenor, tons of really nice looking reskins as well. I have to say that's honestly one of the things I'm most excited about, the fact that so many factions like Gondor and Rudour and Rohan, they're looking a lot nicer now I think, as well as the mechanical changes. So yeah, we're getting ever closer to 0.97, wrapping up 0.96.1 as I said. So this is obviously going to be again one of the sort of the twilight RP battles that I get to show on 0.96, and it was a good one. So big thank you to Arsal. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me to whatever is for whatever is next.